Pam, let's have a conversation about the times in life where things are just rolling along and then something happens and we wake up to ourselves and our system and our environment and our family in an entirely different way.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because this is the opportunities that we can have one of two responses, it seems, when these things happen, because these are the inevitabilities of what happens in life.
When you wake up to something.
When something happens that changes what you thought was or hoped would be, and you start to realize it's a whole different reality.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about the wake up that we didn't necessarily choose it. It doesn't always look the way we would want. We don't get these seminal moments of like, that's where it's often the gut wrenching, I got hit really, really hard. Now what comes out of me is what makes the most, because it's not so much what happened. It's what you do with it and what you discover with what's revealed.
Absolutely.
And that's the email we're going to jump into. And so this was a longer email from a wife. And so we're going to paraphrase parts of it, and we'll have to fill in some of the holes possibly if the conversation goes and it wasn't actually in the email, because we've read it, but we're not going to necessarily read the whole thing on the air.
Okay.
So this is from a wife that says, for almost 20 years, I was the lower desire spouse in my marriage. I loved my husband, but sex often felt like another task on my to-do list. I rejected him a lot over the years. And although he never pressured me or showed me disappointment, I know that this hurt him. A couple of years ago, I discovered he'd had an exchange with inappropriate online messages with another woman. And while nothing physical happened, it completely shook me. Although it caused me a great deal of pain, but in a strange way, it became one of the best things that ever happened to our marriage. It forced me to take an honest look at our relationship, my own sexuality, and the role I had played in our intimacy. Since then, I've done a tremendous amount of work on myself. I used to hate being touched and would almost bristle when my husband would try to hug me. Now I'm the biggest hugger in my family. I've learned about responsive desire, which explains so much. For years, I thought something was wrong with me. I worked through a lot of shame around sex, started initiating for the first time in my life, and I genuinely enjoy sex now. And I actually have a higher libido than I ever imagined possible. The problem is my husband rarely initiates anymore. He says that after years of rejection, he's adapted. In his words, getting into your pants became too much work. He's comfortable having sex every few weeks. He masturbates in between, and occasionally this can be with porn. What hurts me is not the porn itself, but it's the lack of the initiation. When I ask if anything needs to change, he tells me he loves being intimate with me, wouldn't change anything, and feels completely satisfied. Yet my mind keeps asking, if you were truly satisfied with me, wouldn't you want to initiate more? After about 4 or 5 days, I genuinely start wanting to be intimate, so I usually end up being the one who initiates. And in a way, that means he rarely gets the chance to initiate on his own schedule. So my question is this: have we simply switched roles? Is this the natural consequences of 20 years of rejection, where my husband genuinely adapted and no longer feels the drive to pursue me? If so, can that desire to pursue ever return? So there's a lot of things that jump out to this.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I appreciate the fact that she looked at herself in this. She looked in the mirror.
Right, because that's what's interesting. When you read this email, or as listeners who might be hearing this email, most people would have jumped right to the emotional affair and organized the whole story around that. But that's the crux of this whole thing, is we got to dive right into that. This is what happens a lot with clients that come in, where there's something that's really big that have happened, and now they have redefined their whole life orienting around that thing, rather than, okay, what's going on with them as it relates to that thing?
Well, yeah, there's always more to the story.
Right.
There's always more than just the one thing.
Right. Because what's remarkable about her email is she just talks about that as a catalyst for now what she's created and cultivated in herself, which that's such a great way to look at all of the twists and turns of life. Because we can't control and determine what's going to happen, but I can define my responses to them.
Yeah. I mean, she's changed now. She spent 20 years kind of pushing it off, not wanting touch, not really caring about the sex side of things. And now she even said in there, I enjoy sex. I enjoy what comes of this. I initiate. But there's other things that come with it.
Absolutely. But the interesting thing of this is because she talked about, I was the one that would always push it away. It was a to-do list. It was at arm's length. And that's not necessarily low desire. That's almost more avoidance of a part of her life. And with this, what happened, and it cracked things open for her, she started re-examining the entirety of her life as it pertains to affection, touch, connection, sexuality, which that's using the instance of what happened in her marriage as a catalyst for creating something. Because she didn't mention this in her email, but that we read, but she was raised in a childhood world where her parents were strict and loving but cold, and so there was this touch aversion. And now she's the biggest hugger in her family.
That's a big turnaround.
That's a huge thing. And so she's learned how to stop pathologizing herself and actually utilize what's going on to become something that she wants, that she likes, that like she's embracing something in herself. And that's very uncommon, sadly, because far too often what we want to do as humans is fall into the victim, woe is me, how could this happen to me stance. And I can almost promise that's there with it too for her. But it's you get to choose which side you want to feed.
It sounds like she's not feeding that side.
Right. And that's the idea of, you got both sides that are happening, and she chose okay, what can I do with this? And that's the version 2.0 of her.
So what does it take, not what actually happened and what did it actually require? What does it actually require of someone to use something that painful to then make that a doorway into themselves and to see what the possibilities could be for them?
Well, and so this is where we can continue to keep framing things as a two-choice dilemma here. Because what we'll often do is focus on just one thing rather than, I also have another option, which is still that she could have taken the stance of, he needs to make this right. It's up. He is the one at fault here. He's the one. And the interesting thing about this dilemma of what happens in a marriage within the context of it is they have co-created a dynamic. And yes, what he did, he is responsible for. Right? She is not responsible for that. We've had this ad nauseum in episodes in the archives.
Yeah, she's not responsible for the fact that he had an emotional betrayal.
Right. But she could have taken a stance that's far too common of, now he needs to make this right. He needs to make up for this. He needs to create the solution. He's the one that needs to grow. But what she actually did is took the harder question, which is the other side of this dilemma of, okay, what's going on with me here? And this isn't letting him off the hook.
Yeah, that's important to point out.
Absolutely.
You don't, just because you're not putting 100% of the solution on him doesn't mean he's off the hook for what he did.
Right.
He still needs to make some changes. That's certainly, as a spouse, I would want to see some transformation, but I got no control over that. I got to just work on me.
Right. And
That's
so now it becomes this dilemma of, how do I handle my side of the street within a dynamic that will almost force the hand of my spouse to handle their side, or I'll be able to pay attention and see if they are. And this is where she's gotten into problems with her issue of the way she's framing it. And that's where we're going to land in a little bit of, they have switched roles in some ways. And so now she's still framing things on what it used to be versus, okay, what's 2.0 now?
Yeah. Well, and I guess I can kind of relate to her scenario, right? I've gone in, and it took me a lot of years after the first issues you and I had 5 years in, and I was the person that kept blaming you. I didn't pivot as quickly as she did, right? But we had only been married 5 years, whatever reason. I was immature, whatever. I always thought, oh, Corey needs to change, Corey needs to change, Corey needs to change. And it probably wasn't until year number 12 that I really said that question that I always put out on the show here is, would I want to be married to me? Which I feel like is kind of what she's looking at. What is it that's missing within me? What have I not been bringing to the table?
Right, that could be an impetus of what she's used to start to cultivate the life that she's creating.
Yeah, I want something better. And What is it about me that would make a spouse that would want to do something like this? What is it I'm not fulfilling in myself? She didn't even recognize her full sexual potential. And those are things, I mean, you don't have to, that's not an overnight discovery.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't an overnight fix, but so enlightening, so motivating when you can finally start asking yourself those questions. And it really gives you some freedom as well.
That's the bigger issue, is it unhooks us from each other to be more connected in better ways.
Yes. Yes. It's not this fusion of, oh my goodness, everything I do is dependent on whether he's approving or whether he desires me or this or that.
Or he stops acting out, or he or she stops doing XYZ, or, you know, that's where we can get dialed too far to one side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is where, if you look at the way what was prior to the things that cracked this open for her, and then she took this self-discovery, self-confrontation path, which is the steps towards differentiating and growing herself into a different person, the version 2.0 she's referring to. And now she's wondering, because the state of the relationship has shifted in this season, because it may not stay this way, it could, but she's still wondering the way she kind of went through if you go through the email of what we read, she went through all this growth, all this discovery, all this pattern that was a revelation and really living differently. Now she's drifted quietly back to measuring herself through his response on why won't he initiate more, rather than I'm the one that's got more vibrancy in this part of my life than I've ever had. And maybe he is truly just rejected feeling. And so he's pulled back and he's gun shy and he's playing that game, which sometimes it's a real honest reaction. Sometimes it's just a reaction. He's wanting something from you, just like you're wanting something from him, because we're both humans.
Yeah.
But what she's not recognizing is she still has, it's not an avoidance this time, but she's still measuring herself based on his responses or his actions towards her.
Yeah.
Rather than how does she actually embody that and live it.
Yeah.
And be that person. Not so much to looking in his direction to see how she's doing, but to be the one that if you find all of a sudden the biggest hugger in your marriage, then hug people.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll be aware of how they respond to that, but stop the code. Cause I'll do this. Stop the code of reading people before you go in for the hug. Just go in for the hug.
Going for the hug.
Because sometimes you can read it like he's not realizing, because that's what we often do is what growth actually looks like is it's not a straight line. We grow and we kind of, it kind of is a wobbly line because we're figuring ourselves out too. And I'll try something and maybe it's a little bit of a setback, but I think of it in large part over the historical stock market average of, yes, there's major gains and major losses, but on the whole, it's still a growth pattern. And that's kind of the way we are as humans. That I read something wrong and it hurt, and I was really wishing he would have fill in the blank, but he didn't. Okay. What is that? How does that really land on me? What does that really mean to me? Because what she's got in the way she describes it at the end is she's got two different paths here that she's facing. This is her dilemma. One is that when her desire builds and he's not initiating, she has an opportunity to hold it and sit with it and give him a chance to move towards her, but not as a test. It's not the all too common higher desire. I'm just going to sit back and wait. And it's really code for your turn. You better act right. And instead it's like, no, I'm going to live and sit within this anxiety.
Waiting for him to initiate, you mean?
Just understanding the differences we have now aren't about he's the higher desire and is going to always be coming at me. Maybe we are more matched desire, but our nuances of initiating have changed.
Okay.
Right? Maybe because there's all nuance in this thing. We can't just make it in a nice, clean bow. right? So it's this element when she starts to feel it building in her, a desire to build. Well, live with it. I mean, my experiences of when I start feeling very desirous towards you is I enjoy that feeling. That's not something that is painful to me. It's really enjoyable.
Thank
I
goodness.
kind of I like living in this thing.
Yeah.
So live in it a little bit longer, but not as a scorecard or an opportunity to see. Just use it as real information. Just see what it does for you and for your system. Or path 2, she can initiate. And when she does, receive his response as what it is. It's a man that responds to her. What if he's the more responsive desire person now? Men are responsive desires. Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating to me in the difference between spontaneous and responsive, it all is instigated by something.
Yeah, true.
A spontaneous desire still comes from something. So it is a reacting and a responding to something. And so when she can see this is one of the things I think a lot of higher desires struggle with is, how do I know their response is real, where I'm spending all this time trying to read into this? We need to actually do a show on this maybe next week.
Okay.
But of learning just to settle down and engage with who they are in that moment and trust it as it is. Like they're there with me. They're engaged with me. Maybe not the way I want it to be, but they're there. And so how do I settle myself down in that rather than we both lose the more our scorecard role I play?
Sure. Okay. So to kind of break it down for myself in my mind, using that as a way to connect, despite them maybe not responding the way I would expect them to.
Or want them to.
Right.
Because that's the scenario of what's happening is her questions at the end were, will his desire level ever change back to what it once was? Which she has no control over that question.
Well, because she's feeling not desired.
Okay. Maybe.
Right. Maybe. I mean, I think
it's disorienting to be a different part of the dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm familiar with the higher desire spouse role because I've had that dynamic for a long time.
Yeah.
But there have been seasons where maybe I was the lower desire, or in other areas of our life, I am the lower desire. I'm not as familiar with that.
Well, and she's taking his response to her as an affront. Is affront the right
Mm-hmm.
word? On her desirability.
Mm-hmm. Because if you take your cue from someone else and all of a sudden I'm not getting the same cue of it's easy when you're coming at me to feel desired. But if you're not coming at me now, I have a question, am I desirable? Because the context has changed.
Yeah.
And so it really lands on, can she get to where she has enough internal stability to let what he's doing just actually land? If he's responding to her when she initiates, fantastic. It looks different than what she was hoping, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So how do you settle yourself down and handle those moments?
Yeah.
Because this requires it requires her to overcome her expectations of how love should look and have the chance to actually examine what it does look like in that marriage right now.
So what does it look like then for her to just kind of receive his response, him just wanting to be with her, right? Because you get a lot of women, you hear that they think it sounds simple, but in practice, it's not. How do you turn off the scorekeeping card?
You have to settle yourself down. I keep using, or hold on to yourself enough to actually be more aware. It's the same mechanism she used to kind of as the impetus of this whole thing for herself, of real, clearer self-examination. So in those moments where I'm wondering, is he going to initiate? Is he desiring me? Is he engaged with me? How often am I actually doing that blind to myself in the moment?
Yeah.
Because that's what's so fascinating is when I can flip this to where I bring a presence better, I often invite a better presence. If I'm sitting back watching for what kind of presence there is, I often limit the presence because I'm not instigating it very well. I'm not engaged in it myself very well. And so in essence, I ask someone else to call it out of me when that's not their job. They can't do that. So it's realizing what it really comes down to is as she's reading all these scenes with him, That's not a him problem. It's a her problem. She has to learn to, okay, wait, I am a desirous woman. The way I read her email, she likes herself. She likes this version 2.0. It just feels a little precarious because the system's not confirming what it once did.
Fair.
And now she has to reorient to a new system to where she's an anchor point for herself more so than him. Which when you do that, that puts a power discrepancy differences more on each shoulders, which is far better rather than, well, he's the one that's responsible for all of this. I'll just sit back and wait till he cues me in. No. If I'm starting to seek what I really want, if I'm speaking up about what I really want, that's me interjecting my life better.
Yeah.
And the world gets to adjust to me as I also adjust to it. That's marriage that's vibrant. That's where both parties are engaged and hanging on to the process better as they play off of each other in better ways. Yeah. And so it's the same mechanism she's already done. It's just pivoting to where, can I hold on to myself enough to receive what's already here, to see what's already here? Or do I keep measuring myself from what I once was? Because we all have blind spots still of, yeah, I'm still struggling with that. I'm missing that. As a higher desire with you, most of our marriage, I've had many times where I'm recognizing my blindness of like, wait, I'm not seeing your desire just because I'm blind to it. It's there.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for it in a way that I wanted it or I thought it needed to be or whatever, rather than wait a second, but it is there. And that required me getting out of the way to actually see it.
Yeah.
And that's a person that can settle themselves down to where she can now face the dilemma of, if I want to initiate, I'm going to initiate. If I don't want to initiate, but I'm feeling desirous, enjoy feeling desirous and see what comes of it. And both opportunities are incredible learning opportunities and paths, which continue the growth forward for the both of them. But that's the path of recognizing this is really about her sitting in herself better, like she's already doing now, just applying it to the new stage and layer that they're in.
It'd be great to see for her eyes to be open to see how she can apply that. And then it's 3.0 instead of 2.0.
Everything evolves. And that's the point, is we wanted to keep going. And that's the level that she's already well on her way